Mazda Motor Europe. That's where I'm standing right now, and this is the 2023 Mazda CX-60. Now it's interesting because this is an SUV we're not getting in Canada. We do have two slightly larger versions on the way in the near future, but the important part is this is built on Mazda's new large vehicle platform. It's also got some new powertrains, including a plug-in hybrid. And that's what this thing is. So what are we doing here? Well, we're getting a little bit of a sneak peek at what that powertrain is going to be like, as well as what this new large vehicle platform delivers. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. So here I am just outside of Dusseldorf, Germany, driving a Mazda. Seems a little weird, also a little bit weird. This is the Mazda CX-60, which we're not actually getting in North America. So let's clear up some of the confusion. Well, A, we are here at Mazda's European headquarters. It's R&D center because that's kind of where the development of this new large platform is being led. And the CX-60 is the first of 5 products that are on their way that are underpinned by this new large vehicle platform. We will be getting both the CX-70 and the CX-90. I believe the CX-90 is the one that's coming first. So Mazda Canada thought, hey, why not bring some journalists out here so we can check out the CX-60, because it does have some similarities that extend beyond the platform. And a big one is the plug-in hybrid powertrain that is powering this one I am driving. Now, there are some inline 6-cylinder engines that are on their way as well, mild hybrid systems, but this is a proper plug-in hybrid. It's also being done the Mazda way. What does that mean? Well, a little different than the norm that you might expect from a brand like Toyota. So for starters, it's got an 8-speed automatic instead of a continuously variable transmission. And that's very much like Hyundai and Kia. But the cool thing is, this doesn't have a torque converter, and it's also not a dual clutch automatic, okay? It's got a clutch system, it's a multi-plate clutch system, but it's not a dual clutch setup. There's also a clutch that separates the gas engine from the electric motor so that it can make those switches between power sources. But it's an 8-speed auto, no torque converter, because apparently there was quite a bit of loss there, efficiency loss with that torque converter because of the slipping. It's basically wasted gas. You're burning gas doing nothing. That leads to that kind of slipping feeling when you're accelerating in an automatic. So this multi-plate clutch is a little bit different, does make it a bit more responsive. And I think Mazda said it's about 22% better in terms of efficiency loss compared to its previous 6-speed automatic that you're used to in something like the CX-5. And then as far as the powertrain goes, well, it's a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, but very unique. It's mounted longitudinally instead of across the engine. You know, usually if you look under the hood of something powered by a 4-cylinder and you see it aligned across the engine bay, well, this is front to back, and that's because of this new platform, that it's a rear-wheel drive platform, which also seems a little bit confusing because this is an all-wheel drive vehicle, but it's because it's sort of like a rear bias system. It's sort of designed to be rear-wheel drive, but Mazda has it set up for all-wheel drive for this CX-60, and yes, the 70 and the 90 that we will be getting. It's kind of cool. It gives it that sort of premium vibe that you might expect from a brand like BMW or Mercedes-Benz, which is what Mazda is going for, but it won't really tell you that. They said to us earlier today that we think we're kind of reaching into that premium space, but that's not up to us, and we're not going to call ourselves a premium brand. So it is a little bit confusing. What I can tell you, right away, the driving dynamics do feel different. It feels very engaging for a crossover this size, for a mainstream crossover, and that is very Mazda. Mazda's all about that driver-centric approach, to its vehicles. But I can also tell you, at least in this one I'm driving, there are some imperfections. It's not as smooth as I think Mazda hopes, because it made a big deal in this presentation earlier about the suspension setup and the way the dampers are positioned so that they're actually moving in the same direction. They're kind of tilted towards the back of the vehicle, and it's supposed to lead to sort of up and down motion instead of that bucking and pitching back and forth. But I can tell you, out on some of these roads, it's still doing that pitching, so it doesn't feel quite as well executed as it maybe could be. It's just even over some of these little tiny potholes and pockmarks that you can feel that suspension, and the vehicle does seem to kind of pitch a little bit. And maybe I'm just hypersensitive to it right now, but here's my theory. If you're an automaker and you're gonna make a big deal out of something, you're gonna really tell us about all of this fine tuning to the suspension and all the work that's been done to really hone it. Well, obviously I'm gonna be paying attention to the behavior because I'm expecting something different. It's not that this is an uncomfortable SUV. It just feels like, I don't know, any other SUV, maybe a Mazda CX-5. It doesn't feel that different. So the fact that this is this all new suspension setup, but it feels kind of the same as before. Now, something you do notice is all the weight being kind of contained within the wheels. It's all under the passenger cell. Kind of neat, because if you take a look at something like that RAV4 plug-in hybrid, the battery pack, well, it's under the back seat, but this one is still mounted in the floor. It's under where I'm sitting as well as the passengers in the back, but it really contains all that weight between the wheels. And it's that kind of like, the cornering, that optimal range, that kind of center of gravity, it's really in the middle of this vehicle, and you can feel it around the corners. This thing's dynamic, but it's like I always say about SUVs, does that really matter? I'm not totally sold on it, but I can tell you that this thing is fairly nice to drive. And then in terms of the powertrain, well, again, specifics probably going to change a little bit when we get our versions of these new large platform vehicles in North America. This thing makes around 320 horsepower and 370 pound-feet of torque combined, which is quite a bit, even for a plug-in hybrid. So here we are on the Autobahn, an unrestricted stretch, which unfortunately I'm stuck in a little bit of traffic. Hey, it's Friday afternoon. Everyone, I guess, is heading out of town for the weekend. Now, to talk about this powertrain performance, well, it's actually fairly peppy. The issue becomes it is noisy, and it's not noisier than any other hybrid I've driven, plug-in or otherwise, but it's definitely a bit buzzy. But the cool thing is that 8-speed automatic transmission. I said this about the Hyundai Tucson, Kia Sportage, Kia Sorento. Having an automatic instead of a CVT is such a difference maker. It leads to kind of more natural performance. It behaves more like you would expect from a gas-powered vehicle. And so it does make that transition a little easier for those of you who may be getting into your first hybrids. The other cool thing about the 8-speed automatic is that it channels that electric power through it, which again is rare. That's not always the case. And so it is nice because even when you have it in that EV mode, you can actually feel the power channeling through the automatic transmission. It doesn't feel really kind of that, still has that instantaneous nature, but it doesn't feel kind of strained and stretched and like it could wind out endlessly. I've said that before about other hybrids and EVs. So it's a nice setup. And for the most part, well, I can't really tell you how efficient it is because A, we haven't been driving that long, and B, it's that whole WPLT method, the 5-cycle method that we use. Fuel economy numbers aren't going to be the same. Same with electric range. Now, I think Mazda says this thing's good for somewhere in the low 60 kilometer mark on a full charge. That battery should get you somewhere around 62 kilometers or so. It's competitive. I think the Toyota RAV4 hybrid is like 67 kilometers. So right in the ballpark. But again, whether that comes to fruition at home when we use our different testing methods remains to be seen. But I do see Mazda making some strides here to make its plug-in stand out. And that to me is the important thing. And the same goes with that overall vibe, that kind of sort of premium. You can definitely feel it in some ways. Cabin quietness, not too bad. Even out here on the highway, we've got some big trucks around us, but it's fairly well insulated. Even some of the materials aren't too bad, but then some of them do come up short, and there's some I think we are going to see in those vehicles that we are getting, like the CX-90. This stuff here looks really cool, but it's not actually textured. It's just flat, smooth plastic. So it's kind of disappointing to the touch. And then even these armrests on the door, they've got these kind of like hollow pockets to them. When you poke them, it feels like it's missing some material. So that doesn't quite hit that premium market, but the rest of it does. I understand what Mazda's saying about this thing kind of reaching up market a little bit. It's been part of its strategy for a number of years now. It continues with this plug-in hybrid as well as the other 4 large platform vehicles that are on their way. And I will say my impressions here are that I'm very much looking forward to the vehicles we are getting at home. But until then, I'm going to continue to enjoy these stretches of highway here in Germany. And I'm looking forward to driving the CX-90 when it arrives sometime next year. So my test drive was pretty brief, and there were just a few issues I found, but I do have to say I'm very much looking forward to what this platform is going to deliver, especially with slightly larger vehicles like that CX-90. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know exactly what to expect, but this does give us a bit of an idea, and I think with a few tweaks, Mazda is headed in the right direction with this rear-wheel drive based platform and this plug-in hybrid powertrain.